Welcome to The Buzz. We're going to have some fun, hear things you'll never hear anywhere else, and learn how to take 1 hour off your marathon PR. That may be an exaggeration, but I am Buzz Burrell, and we're going to have real conversations with the people who help define this amazing sport of running, which often feels like more than just a sport. So send me your questions and comments to buzz@ultrasignup.com so we can do this together. This is a production of UltraSignup. Thank you for joining me. This is Buzz Burrell. I hope you're enjoying The Buzz. And don't forget that UltraSignup has 2 other shows on its podcast network. Check out The Trailhead with Zoe Rome and Brendan Leonard, where they celebrate the quirks and culture of trail running as only those 2 can do. And Between 2 Pines, our offbeat, laugh-out-loud show with Dom Grossman and Andy Pearson. And here's something new. Both The Buzz and The Trailhead are now on YouTube. So whether you want to listen on the run or watch from home, we've got you covered. Just search for UltraSignup on YouTube and hit subscribe. This episode is brought to you by Arc'teryx. Based in British Columbia, Canada, Arc'teryx has been making outstanding technical outerwear for 35 years, and now they are making outstanding trail running shoes. The Norvan LD4 is the 4th iteration of their popular long-distance shoe. The outsole is Vibram Mega Grip Light Base with 4mm deep lugs, a 6mm heel-to-toe drop, and a total weight of only 10 ounces. There are 3 colorways for men and 5 for women, so these shoes will not only work great in a wide range of conditions, but you're going to look good doing it, which, don't deny it, is important. You can purchase the Norvan LD4 online at arc'teryx.com or at Arc'teryx's own stores. Thank you, Arc'teryx, and to all of you listening for your support of this podcast. Welcome back, everyone. I am talking today with a good friend, a long-term running journalist who's been covering this sport for decades, Brian Metzler. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, Buzz. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, you just got back from Chamonix, France. You got back from covering UTMB World Finals. And this is still on my mind. I don't want to run it into the ground, but it's such a driver of the sport. UTMB kind of talked about it before, but it's still with me. There's some important issues here that I think everyone should know about. So I want to just run these thoughts by you. You were just there, and let me know what you think. Does that work for you?
Yeah, I think it's still top of mind. It should be, and certainly a lot to talk about. And both kind of what happened over the last week, but also kind of new perspectives. I think kind of rumbling up now. So it's good.
Okay. Well, my first proposition is that if you are in attendance covering a race, the race means something. But if you're not there, the race doesn't matter. Everywhere I go, you are there. So is it true that race directors fly you all over the world and put you up in 5-star hotels just to add credibility to their events?
Not true. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes there are press trips. I think I was the only American journalist in Chamonix who paid their own way. I bought my flight. Bought my flight back in April and kind of cobbled together housing and such and here and there. And so, but certainly getting journalists or influencers / creators over there has certainly been a way to get more exposure to the events for any event in any sport, really. I mean, it happens in triathlon, it happens in football, but I've been covering it since 2010 and 2011. And so I've always wanted to be there for the reporting aspect of the sport, and it's always been that big an event. So
it has been. Well, there's a little bit of a joke. So I'm not, after I retire from podcasting with my new yacht that I've purchased from my podcast earnings, I'm not going to get into covering running, apparently.
Or stand-up comedy, maybe.
There were 600 accredited journalists there. So we're going to get into that here shortly. So my next proposition for you is, this is the most competitive ultra marathon in the world. And I should say plural. 3 of them. We all talk about UTMB, the 100-mile plus race around Mont Blanc. But there's also CCC, an acronym for the towns it goes through, 100-kilometer distance. There's also OCC, approximately 50-kilometer distance. And these three together are the most competitive ultra races in the world.
Yeah, I agree. I think that to all the athletes I talked to before and after, certainly that was the primary thing they mentioned. The reason they were there is because of the competition. And if you look at the fields of each one of those races, they're 10 to 15 to 20 deep on athletes who are notable, fast, could win the race, could be in the podium. And so that's what draws everyone there, is the ability to race these people, because we know as our sport, we have a lot of great events. They're kind of all over the calendar, and there's no true, well, I guess we'll get to that. There's been like no true gathering place for everybody. We do have the World Championships coming up, which is now going to be in its third iteration, and that's becoming more of a kind of a point for athletes to go. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how the World Championships in Spain go. But to your point, it is 3 races. It's not just one. It used to be the UTMB, and then they added CCC and maybe 2009 and OCC in 2014, and those immediately became more competitive. And it's also interesting how much those race dynamics have become so fast. Like, for example, OCC is a 50K where you've got a red line, you've got to push to the red line and then hope to survive to be competitive, right? And CCC is not a shorter version of UTMB. It's a longer version of OCC, where again, you've got to be in the group when you go over the pass from Italy into Switzerland to be hopeful to be competitive. Because if you're not in it, the whole way, you're not going to be in it.
Good point, Brian. And we saw that this year. So UTMB, which is a little over 100 miles, runs like a traditional 100-miler, it's kind of a time trial, really. I mean, no one's bumping elbows. There could be hours of separation between you and someone else. Well, CCC and OCC were not like that. They're kind of like a marathon. If you're not in that front peloton, you're going to get dropped. And indeed, OCC, which stands for Osier Chamonix, was won by some guy named Jim Walmsley, who was passed like 10K from the finish and had to run the guy down. So this is actually a 55-kilometer race. He won by 18 seconds. So that's racing.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple things with that. Jim certainly he was injured earlier in the year. He had wanted to do Western States and UTMB initially. I think once he got healthy, he wanted to come to Chamonix and race, but he made the decision to run OCC in part because he wants to go to the World Championships next month. So that's point one. Secondly, what we find in the 50K distance is there's a lot of athletes we didn't maybe know about that emerge, right? That have strong backgrounds in sub ultra running. This Italian guy was also a good skimo racer, and so he's got cred in terms of fast, hard mountain running. And so it wasn't going to be a situation where Jim was going to go in and win no problem. There were some really good runners in there, and so Jim got past, and I think he was surprised, but obviously he had to earn it. And so that final kick, he was running 5:15, 5:30 miles on the way in. So he was moving,
Yeah, I just delight in that sort of thing. It's an actual race. And notably, to your point, Brian, the French national team did not allow any of their team members to do the 100 because they said they would not be in good shape for the World Championships in September, which is a good call. In my opinion, we have to focus, I think, on the World Championships, even the national championships, because otherwise it's a little bit of this potpourri of proprietary events. Someone can go to Hard Rock, someone can go to Western States, someone can go to here, and then the top runners don't actually meet each other. It's sort of annoying in that respect.
Yeah, that's increasingly an American problem because of the events you just mentioned. I think that internationally, I think the World Championships certainly are going to rise up and be something. I think the challenge has been the first one in Thailand was delayed because of COVID, and then there's a gap every other year. I guess there wasn't 21 in 2022, and then now there's a gap. But I think it'll become something. I think this will be also a precursor eventually to getting our sport into the Olympics, of which there's pros and cons about that. But I think that an example is Katie Scheid. Katie Scheid had won Hard Rock in a record time, right? And people were hoping she'd go to UTMB and race against Courtney, all those things. And she, she wasn't ducking Courtney. She smartly wanted to, save herself. I mean, Hard Rock was only 7 weeks ago right now. And so I think that she wanted to also race in the World Championships. And that, again, she raced OCC? Sure, but she didn't. And obviously, the World Championships mean something to a lot of athletes, especially increasingly American athletes.
Right. I appreciate that a great deal. And of course, Katie is from New England originally, but she's been living in France. I can't remember how long, maybe 8 years or so. And instead of doing OCC, like you said, she did Sierre-Zinal, the most competitive mountain race in the world, and did very well. So I think the World Championships are going to be a very interesting race.
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, like one of the things that everyone's asked about and hoping for in the sport is they want to see Katie and Courtney race, right? And that's the unique thing. I mean, they did race most recently, I think, at Western States in 2023 when they went 1-2. And it's an exciting thing to have two, top athletes like that at a time when there's more depth in the women's side of the sport than ever before. I guarantee you, they're not ducking each other. I mean, they plan their schedules a year in advance, and as much as we'd all like to see them race, it'll happen eventually. I mean, both have said that, and so it just happened to be that, again, the way their schedules lined up this year just wasn't going to happen.
Right. And Courtney, that's a little interesting sub story, isn't it? I think most people would say that Courtney's been the best female trail ultra runner in the world for, 5 years or something like that. While Katie actually last year was Trail Runner of the Year and Ultra Runner of the Year, and has the course records at Hard Rock and UTMB now. Now, Courtney, I think showed, in my opinion, I'm guessing you're going to agree, a lot of cred, but she finished 10th. A lot of people are saying there's no way she could lose. That wasn't my prediction personally, even though I respect her ability and her ability massively, but she finished 10th. But she finished, right? That wasn't a DNF. She was not cruising. She was leading in that race 2/3 of the way through. And that's when a lot of top people are going to say, I don't got this. They're going to drop out. And she slogged it on in.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think you're spot on with a lot of that. I think that Courtney really showed the courage and the respect for the race, for everyone else in the race, the volunteers, the other runners, to grind it out, right? It's almost too easy to drop. I mean, if you're hurt, if you're sick, certainly you can drop. But I mean, obviously she was leading, half the way to Chamonix, right? And so, there's still a long way to go from there, a lot of climbs, and Courtney's human, right? Certainly she's been mostly undefeated, right? But she's also had issues in its past with stomach issues and in certain things. I mean, like, she's human, right? And so we've all relished in her incredible record that she's had in the last several years, and yet it's almost more comforting to know that she's human, and that performance she had was I would never wish any kind of poor performance on her, but like for her, the way her legs struggled, the way she said that her legs gave out. I mean, the fact that she was hiking and walking and sitting in aid stations, I mean, and then continued on, shows a lot about who she is, right? And what she, both what she cares about the sport and also kind of what she means to the sport. The reception when she got into Chamonix in 10th place, which still is amazing that, after all that, she finished 10th, right? I mean, like, 10th on for anyone is exceptional. In this case, it wasn't exceptional for her, but it was a really exceptional effort. And so the warm reception she got in Chamonix was really cool. I mean, you could see people tearing up and everything else. But they were so like invigorated by that.
That's a heck of a point. She got total respect for slogging it out and finishing 10th. And like you said, you and I aren't going to finish 10th. So it's just this odd reference point. I'm going to offer a little, since we're on the topic, a little personal opinion. Tell me if I'm just should be quiet on this. But Courtney, the GOAT, the GOAT, the greatest of all time. But she's also got that number 4 in her age, right? That's a little different. Secondly, when I talk to people, of course, myself included, other people on this podcast, people say you have 6 to 8 years at the top of your game. It's hard to go longer than that at the world-class level. And thirdly, Courtney did the triple 2 years ago. And I haven't heard anyone else say this, but I mean, that was unbelievable. Not unbelievable because she did it, but it was an incredible accomplishment winning the Hard Rock 100, Western States 100, Ultra Tour du Mont Blanc in the same year. I'm not sure if you can recover fully from that. Again, major personal question I'm just putting out there.
I mean, I mean that's a question best directed at her. I think that certainly she has done a lot, and she has done a lot to really push the envelope of the sport. Has she had long term effects from that? I don't know. I think a lot of runners do. You look at through the history of ultra running and also marathoning. There's plenty of examples where people kind of destroyed themselves pretty well, and they maybe weren't 100% the same on the way back. I mean, I think Jeff Rose probably is an example of that. You know, he had a great run. I think he won 7 straight hundreds, and then he kind of had to back away from the sport. But I think Courtney does a lot. She's on a bike. She's on her feet. You know, she skis. I mean, she does a lot of things. I think that she's probably smart about what she's doing, and so you know, I don't think she's, you know, going away from the sport. I think that was perhaps a one-time thing. I don't know, but you know, the one beauty of that is like there was, you know, it allowed like hopefully some other attention to be on top women that ran pretty well. You know, Ruth Croft was, you know, even if Courtney's legs didn't give out, Ruth Croft was going to win that race. She was exceptional, you know, and so I think that it shows that like there are a lot of great women in the sport, and hopefully we can get more attention to those women. You know, in the wake of what Courtney's been has been great, but I think that certainly there's a lot of others deserving of attention, and certainly that win from Ruth was exceptional.
Indeed. Good point. Before we leave this topic of the competitiveness of these 3 events, and by the way, there's actually 8 races part of UTMB week. We're talking about 3 of them right now. But going back to the 100-miler, here's an interesting statistic. The dropout rate I thought was massive. I took a quick look, and among the pro men, 54% dropped. And just offhand, I looked at the podium, the top 10, and a lot of them had dropped out in previous events. 44, I think, percent of the pro females dropped out. That's a high percentage. And so here's another little, you know, let's wonder about this for a second. I think when ultra running came in, DNFs were a big thing. People learned they had to eat a lot, they had to drink a lot, and, you know, train by going slow and long and consistent. And so the dropout rate went down. But now among the elites, it's sort of going back up. And I wonder if this is because the pressure on professionalism. About 8 years ago, a runner, when I was, you know, directing Ultimate Direction, a runner said something very poignant to me. He said, unless you're in the top 10 at UTMB, you don't matter. It's like, whoa, that's harsh. I was like, dang, we don't really want the sport to be like that. But if it is like that, maybe, Brian, what we're seeing is people are going to blow or go. You know, they're, instead of running their own race at their own pace, they feel that they got to keep up. Otherwise, they're not going to be in the top 10. And so there is a very high DNF rate.
Yeah, I have a couple points about that. I think that I did hear some people say that, like, you know, the weather was a big challenge. So when the race started, there was a light drizzle in Chamonix, and then as they moved on to Saint Gervais and like Contamine, it was much more thicker rain, heavier rain, and then it got colder. And so by the time they got around Notre Dame and some of the first passes, Col de Sing had 6 inches of snow on it. So I think that the weather was a factor earlier, and so people had to really buckle down. And so I did hear people that talked that literally said, "Look, because I got through the cold that was in Italy, right? The cold and the snow, I bundled up through that. I got through that. By the time they got into Switzerland, where it normally gets hard, right? Champay and over into Triant, and then on to, you know, France and Vallorcine, where those last climbs are massive. I think people were buckled down and like saying, I'm gonna do this. Certainly, there was a good amount of people that dropped out. I think 2 takeaways relative to your point about professionalism is, you know, do athletes have contracts that give them a bonus just to finish, or is there a top 10 finish? You know, we don't know that maybe. And I think that, I think also that athletes realize that, like, you can only have a couple of good, you know, long ultras a year. And so dropping out might be a way to save themselves for another race. It might be as soon as like the Nice 100K in France, or some other race, right? Or World Championships in this case. So, you know, it's hard to either, you know, pass judgment or get inside the head generically. Obviously, each individual case is its own, but I think certainly professionalism is, you know, would it be better to finish in a top 10 place in Chamonix or have a DNF if you're going to be 18th or 23rd, right? So that's the rub, right? And there's a lot there. Again, our contracts promoting that. There was one brand I know that was trying to make a presence in Chamonix and was giving a $2,000 bonus to start races, right? So athletes who didn't, know what they're going to do, like they got a bonus just to be there because those brands wanted exposure in Chamonix, which we know was a big thing.
Wow, I did not hear about that. The appearance fee, as that's called, that's dramatic. That's kind of new in this. And like you
Yep.
say, that was posing a very interesting question. And so if you need to be in the top 10, if you're going to finish 23rd, which again is not bad. I mean, 23rd is actually really good at a competitive race like that. But maybe it's better to DNF because you don't want to see the 23rd number by your name. So it's sort of an odd way of looking at it. I don't know, just kind of putting it out there.
Yep, totally agree with that. There's a lot more kind of on the line and behind the scenes, behind the curtain than we ever, had 20 years ago.
Brian, number 2 here for you. I'm going to suggest that UTMB week, obviously it's a race, but number 2, it's the most important running trade show in the world now. Of course, there's OR, Outdoor Retailer, for going on for decades, TRE, the running event in Austin, Texas. But is UTMB week now more prestigious and more important to be at than any of those?
Well, certainly we've seen an increased number of brands activating during UTMB week, and that's a twofold thing. It's one, certainly to show off new shoes for the international media that is there, but also for the public is there, right? And get excitement for what's going on, and that kind of nefarious thing of exposure in Chamonix. And like to that point, all the brands that are having fun runs, showing off their new shoe and demoing their shoes, all have everybody in color coded shirts. So Brooks had people in blue shirts, and Hoka had people in orange shirts, or whatever it was. And so when you'd see one of what was dozens of fun runs through Chamonix during the week, you kind of like, oh, you know what brand that is, right? And so I think that as a true trade show, I think TRE is probably the leader in the running space. I think ISPO in Europe has, I think, fallen off a little bit, but I think certainly this as a trade show concept is important because, again, all the brands are there, brands you haven't maybe heard of or thought about, and not on your bingo card, and then they're activating, certainly for the increased number of kind of running tourists who are there, who are, which is at the core of the sport. And then also, again, for the media. And so for the media, meaning traditional media, more like myself. And so also like, content producers, influencers. Believe in the Run was there. Tommy Runs from Detroit was there. I mean, there was some, there's a good collection of people that, even further into the mainstream that get exposure for these brands, that they know that, they're basically an extension of marketing in some ways. And so there was a huge buzz for new shoe drops, and, the 3 biggest, I think, were the Nike ACG shoe, the new Brooks shoe, Brooks Super shoe, which Cascadia Elite, and then the second version of the Adidas Speed Ultra was out there too. Yeah, yeah. So, but there was a bunch. There was maybe a dozen shoes launched.
The shoe wars.
Yeah.
I mean, there's 2 races in one, really. I mean, there's the running race and there's the shoe race. When I flew into Geneva 3 years ago, I mean, there's Hoka banners at the airport. I mean, if you're flying into Denver, Salt Lake City, or somewhere, there's not banners at DIA for shoe brands. I mean, it's next level. I was of course, in Chamonix for about 3 weeks this July. I'm running above town and go by this chalet, not quite in the middle of nowhere, but wasn't in the main part of town. And it was branded Brooks. Turns out some of these companies were rented entire chalets for the entire summer. Brian, I'm missing out. I mean, I'm just this old guy. I'm off the back of the bus somehow.
Well, money is definitely raining down on the sport, and maybe all the good ways and maybe some of the not so good ways. I think Brooks sponsored the Alpi bus shuttle service from Geneva to Chamonix. It was pretty prevalent. There was definitely prevalent, restaurant renovations or, modifications for these activations. And certainly you knew which brand was staying in which hotel, So I think that there's a lot of money being spent there. I think maybe up until recently, it was maybe to Hoka's chagrin because Hoka sponsors the whole thing, and yet they know that there was a lot of brands that were putting on a lot of events under the covers, so to speak, and now you see it more open, where there's more brands doing things. So I think any brand that wants to be in trail, and however they want to come there, is going to be in Chamonix to have a presence, right? And that was brands like the ones I mentioned, but it's also, all our brands that haven't traditionally been on the forefront of your mind.
Right. When you go over there, there's French brands making running vests and so forth that never heard of them. They're really good and they're making an impact. And at the other end of the spectrum, major traditional brands like Asics. Asics has been around forever. A lot of people don't know that Blue Ribbon Sports, which became Nike, was a distributor for Asics in Oregon, the Northwest distributor. They've been around for a long time. And now their athletes, if you will call them their athletes, went 1-2 in the men's race. And so that's a Japanese brand. They're in big time now, right? Adidas is second only to Nike in its size, and Ruth Croft is Adidas. So the big boys are playing in trail now.
Absolutely. And Nike, we both know the history of that. Nike was making trail shoes or a version of a trail shoe back in the early 80s, right? Before it was a thing. And then Nike ACG first launched in 1989. So they had off-road trail shoes then. Obviously, they've had a variety of trail shoes from Nike Running or Nike ACG. And they decided with this new shoe to relaunch the ACG brand. So that's a thing, which says, more than the branding, it really shows me that Nike is in trail for real. When they launched their trail team initially in 2014, they had good success, 2015, 2016, 2017, and then they backed away from it a little bit. So some of those initial athletes that were with those brands were let go and they found other brands. But now Nike is back, and I think certainly understanding the magnitude of the growth, that's a big thing. But to your point, yeah, all the other brands, I think Brooks is one that's come strong in the last several years in a lot of different ways with sponsored athletes and new shoes. Asics is interesting because they do a lot more in Europe than they've ever done in the U.S. They've always had good trail shoes, and in the U.S. they don't really market them as well or as much. They certainly sell them here, but they don't do much with them, so you don't really know that. But in terms of athletes and such, but there's, I think, two of the most interesting brands. Mount to Coast is a new brand that launched about 2 years ago. And they've made a presence with new trail shoes, the T1 and then the H1 gravel shoe. And then also the Chinese brand Kalis is a really interesting thing. They are big in China. When I was in Thailand for a race a couple of years ago, they were huge over there. And certainly they've tried to make a push into Europe. I think they went to Italy first. And their goal is, maybe a year and a half from now, they're going to come into the US. And it'll be interesting to see how that brand comes in and maybe changes the scope of how we know things here, either at retail or with just kind of brands that we're interested in.
Is Kailash the same brand that has the chain stores all over Europe?
I can't speak to that directly. I know they came into Italy first. Now they're in France, and so they have a presence for sure.
Gotcha. And if it's the same, this is the place where you can buy a running vest for $39.95. And decathlon. Right. But like you say, when China gets involved, it's all of a sudden you've bumped to another level. And
different scale in a lot of ways, because as much as every brand has told me that they're selling, more and more shoes every year in China, and it's an important part of their strategy, those Chinese brands, when they come here, will make an impact, right? One that can possibly do it less expensive. That would be an interesting thing for some brands here. If they're bringing in a really high quality trail running shoe for, say, $20 or $30 less, that could upset the market for sure. I think certainly as more races are becoming notable in China, there's probably more trail runners in China already than there are in the U.S. Which is, but that's how big it is. I think there's 5 UTMB races, and there's literally dozens of other really good trail running races in China. So it's the impact is already being felt.
It's already being felt. We'll see how we feel it, because of course there's this thing called tariffs. And so right now, if you want to buy an electric vehicle, by far the best value are being made in China, but they're not available in the United States. They are starting to become available in Europe, and that's what the Australians purchase. But we'll see how that goes with running shoes and other products. You said, Brian,
I was saying one more thing. Politics aside, I think that two things happen. One, we've seen more Chinese runners making top 10s and podiums in UTMB in recent years. I think the COVID restrictions still banned them in 2021, but 2022 to now, there's been a bigger Chinese presence, both from elites and also there seem to be more Chinese runners competing in all the races at their own level. So I think that's a big thing. And then also, I think I saw a stat somewhere that the participation of women in longer ultras in China is much higher, say 40% plus, which is interesting. I think UTMB had 10% women this year, the UTMB race, which is, still small and too small, but obviously I think it's gone up from 6 to 8% to now 10%. But obviously East Asia, China specifically, has a greater, participation rate among women.
Right. That's always been a massive discrepancy, which a lot of people aren't aware of. In the United States, thanks to Title IX, which basically changed the world of sport forever, America's had very good female participation in all sports, particularly running, including, but to a lesser extent, ultra running. Because ultra running takes a lot of time, and what demographic has that amount of time? And Europe was always spectacularly low. I mean, ultra running was about 6% in Europe, female participation. So that's interesting that in China it's about 40%.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that, it would be great to see greater participation. It's not an overnight change. I think there's plenty of athletes like Stephanie Case who are doing a lot and plenty of runners in the United States, Corinne Malcolm. I mean, they're doing a lot of things to elevate the presence of women in those events. I think certainly it's going to take time, but I think that certainly it takes race directors, it takes athletes, it takes brands to be able to elevate women, to encourage women, all those things. And obviously we've seen women just dominating on a global scale. So it only makes the sport better. So the more we can increase that participation level, the better everything will be.
You told me before we started recording, Brian, 558 Americans were in the 3 marquee races at UTMB week, up from 3 in the first year. But you suspected maybe 1,000 Chinese were participating, almost twice as many Chinese as Americans.
Yeah, I haven't seen the final stats yet. I'm waiting for those. But certainly, when I was first there, I've run OCC and CCC and MCC, and I always looked through to see what other Americans were there. In those early 2010s, there was 120 or 140. It was growing every year, but to see 550, it still seems like a smallish number compared to the 10 or 12,000 people that are totally there. It's still dominated by French runners. I think we've seen an increase as more awareness of what those events are, certainly with the UTMB World Series. But I think that, as I said, China has definitely had a big presence in recent years. And, if you spend time, like I said, in East Asia races, you'll see a huge Chinese presence. And so this year, the Chinese presence by way of athletes and races, by running clubs there, waving the flag and everything else, I think it was big. So that's a very real thing for sure.
We've noted, obviously, that UTMB was and still is a race. Secondly, that it's probably the most important running trade show in the world, which is sort of a surprise, a real evolution. But thirdly, it's a festival. It's like Burning Man, which is going on right now, Coachella, or someone said UTMB is the Olympics, Cannes Film Festival, and Fashion Week all rolled into one.
Yeah, it's a vibe for sure. I mean, when I was first there, there was definitely, roughly the same amount of, athletes competing. But the biggest thing in the last probably 2, and especially this year, UTMB weeks, is that there was so many more people in town just to witness it all, right? That I suspected maybe, with the same number of racers, I think there's more supporters, family members, friends, people that weren't associated with anybody wanted to be there to experience that. And it's, it was a thing for sure. I mean, people that are there to run on their own, do their own trail runs, right, and experience the vibe. It's a fun, beautiful place to be. And it's if you're a fan of the sport or in the sport, it's inspiring to be there, especially to be out on the course. The challenge will be certainly, kind of in looking back, how has that impact felt, right? I think there was more people at aid stations, cheering and everything else than ever before, which is great. But also, obviously UTMB is trying to control the impact, and certainly more people there is going to create more impact. So it was definitely a thing, though, with all the brand activations. I mean, the village was packed all the time. It was pretty exciting. And again, if you're in the sport, it's the place to be. It feels like the Boston Marathon week,
Right. Well, someone counted more than 500 activations
Yeah,
in 1 week.
I probably only made like about 20 of those, but there was definitely there was something going on all the time. I mean, like athlete panels and movies and fun runs and shoe launches and all kinds of stuff. There was a lot going on from pretty much Monday until Sunday for sure.
I look at my Strava feed, and there's my friend Anton Krapicka. He was over there. He wasn't in any of the events, but La Sportiva, you got to show up. So he was leading a fun run. Oh, there it is on Strava. And then there is Jenny Scott Jurek. He was leading a Brooks fun run. I looked at it. I said, wait, I actually responded on the Strava feed. Did you see each other? Because they apparently started 25 minutes apart in separate events and essentially the same course. I think it's complete coincidence. So how many fun runs did you participate in, Brian?
I probably participated in 3 or 4.
Oh, that's solid.
And did plenty of my own running. There's only so many, most of those runs go on the river path or in the lower flanks of Balkan Sud, but they're a thing for sure. And yet, there's only so many of those runs you really want to do with 60 to 100 people, right? I saw Scott many times. I didn't see TK at all. I mean, I know he did an event with Sportiva in Les Ouches, and I wanted to make it, but again, the schedule was so packed. I was already committed to other things. I couldn't get to his talk. It would have been great because Tony's great, obviously. But I did see Scott several times, and even amid trying to talk to him. He was at the Brooks shoe launch, of course, but like even trying to have a conversation with him in the village, people would come up to him and say, "Oh, Scott Jurek, can I have a photo with you, a selfie with you?" And so, I think probably he was among the top 10 of the selfie requests. Perhaps far behind Courtney, but certainly he was getting quite a bit of attention.
All right, there you go. 50 fun runs, and each one has their color coordinated T-shirt. So I saw a video. There's actually a YouTube video piecing together UTMB week fun runs. I'm not going to share the URL in this. I'm not going to really recommend it. I'm just going to note its presence, and I also am going to note that by one count of the live stream, there were 175 million video views. That's
Wow.
Activation.
Yeah, I mean that I will say that we've been blessed by the recent upswing in live stream in the U.S. thanks largely to Jamil and his crew. I mean that's changed the game for the sport. But certainly the UTMB live stream is probably the pinnacle of that, right? I mean like they have former Olympic and World Cup mountain bikers, and ultra elite ultra runners on follow cams, like providing that coverage, right? And so we see it, and it's seamless to watch these guys run, and yet like there's elite athletes that are kind of in camera control there. So, but I think both with UTMB the coverage, and then also what Jamil's done in the U.S., I think that's changed the game quite a bit because now there's a greater presence. I mean, when the live stream 7 or 8 years ago was on, people certainly a core of the sport would watch it, but now I had friends texting me, they're at home working or doing whatever, and they're like, "Are you watching this?" I'm like, "Well, I am watching it, but I'm actually here," and like but I think more than ever people are able to tune in and not only see the action, but also I think it's a great entree into the sport for that maybe that curious person who's like just getting into it and realizing like, these are actually human beings running around doing things. I can do all that. I want to do that. I'm inspired by that. And so I think the live stream probably hopefully is taking down some of the intimidation factor, where before, if you were a new trail runner, and like, maybe you'd not been to Western States or Hard Rock, and even going there is intimidating, right? But now seeing it on your laptop or on your phone, I think it like people go like, "Oh, I can do that. I want to do that." And like knowing also that, showing some of the finishes of people coming in with the rest of us regular human beings, long after the elites, people are like, "Oh, I want to be there. I want to do that." So I think the live stream has been multifold in its success. The ability to kind of show the sport in its true essence, but also, make it human too.
Nice. Well, that's an amazing wrap up, Brian. Thanks. We're glad you were there and give us the full report. It's an impactful event in many ways. And what now, as we start to wrap this up, do you think does it mean? I mean, you just said that a nice point that watching this live stream, which had worldwide following, particularly in Europe, actually, might bring lessen the intimidation factor, might bring more people into the sport. But is UTMB too big? Is it sucking the air out of the room? Is it too professional? What do you think? What are your takeaways on that level?
I think that, like, the cat's out of the bag. We're not going to stop the growth of the sport, right? So it's growing, and now it's how can we kind of hopefully kind of push that in the right direction, right? There's going to be a lot more money, a lot more people involved, increasingly so in the next 5 to 10 years. Pulling back to your point, I mean, UTMB is extraordinary. TMB is not everything. It doesn't have to be everything, right? The sole goal for every trail runner doesn't have to be to go to run in Chamonix. Chamonix is a beautiful place, and it's especially even more beautiful when UTMB week isn't happening. There's great trails to run. The culture is amazing. But the point of trail running is really to be in a place where you are and move through the environment and through nature. And that could be, if you live in Boulder, Colorado, where I do, or Burlington, Vermont, or suburban Chicago, or wherever it is. Trail running is beautiful wherever it is. And so, to that point, whatever UTMB is and however it's growing, it's not the only thing. It doesn't have to be, and it shouldn't be for runners, right? I mean, there's a lot of things to aspire to. Your first 50K, your first 100 mile, your next 100 mile, right? But like exploring new places, that are more local to you certainly is a great thing to do. There's dozens of races within a 2-hour drive for me that I would like to, pursue or check out, or trails, So I think that's kind of the essence of it. It's UTMB is growing. The World Series is growing. There's concerns about the impact, both from internally at UTMB and then externally from other people. And, we've created this thing that is especially enticing and beautiful. And yet we know that it's hard to do because we're putting more people into sacred places that are not maybe able to handle that kind of impact. So that's one of the biggest things that we're going to have to be challenged with here going forward. But also, again, there's going to be more money and more sponsorships. And, while that, is rounding out into a kind of a more complete sport, it's also got its own dark side too, right?
Right. Brian, that's an excellent summary. I agree completely. Right. I mean, we define the sport. I mean, I'm asked this on a regular basis, just as I asked you. And what do you think? What, you're going to lose the culture? Well, of course, we define the culture every minute for ourselves. You and I are going to get together. We're not going to go turn on the TV. We're going to go for a run.
I think there's two trends to the growth. There's probably, it's still at the core, which is, the core always sucks people in. Once you get into trail running, you want to be more involved, right? And it's so accommodating and so, inviting that, and I say that within reason, because obviously there's certain groups that don't feel like they're invited yet, but we want to get more diversity in the sport. But I think at the core, which is participating for your own reasons and your own events and all that stuff is super important. Again, it's your own personal experience moving through nature. I think that's the core of it. I think we're going to see from the mainstream level kind of a dip the toe into the sport kind of thing, which is becoming kind of notable and cultural, right? I think because you'll see more trail brands becoming part of pop culture, wearing stuff around New York City, or just kind of dabbling in it, or there's a certain kind of badge of honor that you have trail running cred, right? And so I think we'll see, for better or for worse, kind of more of that kind of wider mainstream involvement, and maybe those people never run 100 miles, but they want to be associated with all the best aspects of trail running. So we'll see more of that happening, and we'll also see brands that are really catering toward that. I think that even Salomon has put a lot of dollars into new stores around the country that are in bigger metropolitan areas, in which they're trying to get that Salomon trail cred into the hands of people that might be mostly road runners or maybe not ultra runners at the core. But I think there's a place for everybody.
Does that mean you and I will be cool, Brian?
Buzz will never be cool.
That's definitely my opinion. But we're getting closer, as you said. I mean, 10 years ago, you go to Chamonix and people are walking around in boots, with crampons on their back, with a rope. I mean, that was the thing. You walked around town. You went out for a beer with this rope around you. And starting about 4 years ago, no, they're gone. Now, people are getting on and off the buses and trains with a running vest. You walk down, you look at the shops where they're selling fur coats, $400 shoes, and the mannequins in the windows are wearing running vests. So wow, the whole vibe, as you said, the culture has changed in the sport, in the industry, I should say, which I've been in. We used to talk about athleisure. Everyone wanted to get into athleisure, which was a hard thing to do but the big wigs saw that's where the money is. Now the new term is door to trail. So you can wear the same gear walking out the door. And the suits, pardon me, but the corporate people look at this and they see a lot of dollar signs. Take, for example, yoga and yoga pants. How many billions of pairs of yoga pants are sold every year? And so if you can do the same thing for trail shoes, because people want to have the look, you got dollar signs.
Yeah, I think for sure that's we've been pushing ultra as the front face of trail running for years, and that's been understandable and been natural relative to where our stars are, and where the most focus is. But I think really there's a huge growth in sub ultra. I don't like that name any more than you do. I think the shorter distance, 5K to 25K, 10 miles. That's where the growth is going to be. That's where the majority of runners probably will exist. We already know that there's people that say I'm not a trail runner, but that's because they're not deep into the ultra scene, but they still appreciate the beauty and the joy of running on a trail on their weekend run. So it's already there, and now there's gonna be more brands kind of catering to that. I think these kind of quasi gravel shoes that do a little bit of everything and they're not super technical are going to be a bigger part of the industry. I think that again that person who's going to a happy hour pub wherever they live in a pair of trail running shoes is going to be much more common as part of the lifestyle of trail running. And again, that whole badge of honor, like, hey, I'm a trail runner, right, is going to be a good thing for everybody. And it's certainly going to help grow the sport in different ways. And eventually, if 5 to 30% of those people come over to, a more deeper involvement in ultras, that's good too,
Right. Well, as you said, Salomon is actually opening branded stores in New York City and the second one in Chicago. That's, we're not talking about Boulder and Burlington. We're talking about New York and Chicago. So they're following, somewhere else. They're following the yoga tights, right? And how about puffy jackets? There's puffy jackets are ubiquitous. And so maybe trail running shoes. You look at some of the bigger brands. We mentioned Hoka earlier, and we saw them break out, not necessarily, I don't think, with Jim Walmsley, who's been a Hoka ambassador forever, but when your nurses and waiters started wearing Hokas all day long because they're on their feet. On the Swiss company, about 5 years ago in Europe, same thing. All your people on their feet all day long started wearing Ons, and that's where the money actually is.
Yeah. I mean, it gives more brands more of a budget to spend on the core trail running, which we know is the athletes and the events. But I think that certainly that's only spurring more growth. So the more the mainstream comes in and identifies with, I want some of those trail runners, I want some of those Hokas. Right? That's only going to grow. The brands are going to reinvest in trail that way. Years ago, if trail running shoes, back in the early 2000s was 5% of their sales of shoes, it's probably now more like 30%, and growing. And certainly road running is still much bigger, but I think that there's trends and shoes and technology coming out of trail that is hitting the mainstream that is gonna benefit everybody.
The cushion, Hoka was the first max cushion shoe, and that was Jean-Luc and Nicolas from Salomon. And of course, that's, pardon the exclamation, but you'd be an idiot to not wear a very cushioned shoe in a road marathon. But that came out of trail, so that's a very good point, Brian.
Yeah, a lot going on. I think also the biggest trend one of the biggest trends is, like, I talked about diversity earlier and the need for it in the sport. I think, as an event like UTMB is pretty diverse, has a lot of different nationalities in it, of course. But I think in the US, we're still fighting to get more of a diverse following in the sport. I think certainly, opening stores in metro areas is going to bring a wider range of people and backgrounds, which I think is good for the sport. I think that, the sport grew out of places, like you said, Burlington and Bend and Boulder and everything else, which aren't typically diverse places. So I think diversity will be another key part, an important part of the growth of the next 5 to 10 years.
That's a good projection. I like that one. Brian, this has been fantastic. Through the lens of UTMB, we've kind of blown it up, looked at the sport in general, look where it might be going, and including some positive aspects like greater diversity that you just mentioned. I am, however, a little disappointed that you and I are still not cool.
It's never going to happen, Buzz. I mean, there's plenty of people we know are cool out there, and we're just not on that same platform.
Well, until next time. You're okay with that? Well, I'm still struggling. I still have aspirations.
Gotta have goals.
And my next goal is the U.S. ATF Half Marathon Trail Championships in Moab, Utah, and hopefully I will see you there again as I usually do, Brian.
I will be there. Thanks, Buzz. It's been good.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for joining me. I feel like I'm with all my friends. This is Buzz Burrell, and I'll be back 2 weeks from today, delivering more thoughts you've probably never heard before. This podcast is a production of UltraSignup and releases every other Tuesday, alternating with The Trailhead with Zoe Rome and Brendan Leonard. If you've enjoyed this, please subscribe and click that button that says 5 stars, because that helps other people find this. Thank you.